So today's webinar is something we do or try to do just about every month. It's a partner introduction for those of you that have recently joined our partner programs for new resellers, or for those of you that just need a refresher on what we've got. We're going to be doing a high-level overview of our core product lines today. Feel free to ask questions using the question and answer interface, and I'll do my best to answer them as we go through. My focus here at Zyxel is on our cloud solutions, on wireless and consumer products. So if you want to stump me, ask me questions on the security products. That's probably where I have the most trouble, but feel free to send those questions in and I'll let you know if I don't know the answer. So to start with here, Zyxel's been making computer networking equipment for over 30 years. We got started all the way back in 1989. Our company is based out of Taiwan. Our US office is based out of Anaheim, California. So when you're dealing with whether it be sales or marketing or tech support, you are calling into our Anaheim office. At this point, we're working on a hybrid schedule. So a lot of people are working out of their homes, or at least working out of their homes some days during the week. But basically everything in North America is run out of our Anaheim office. So it's Anaheim, California, just down the road from Disneyland. So if you've joined our partner program, it gets you access to some things that you wouldn't necessarily normally have, one being webinars like today's. It gives you priority access to our tech support team, gives you access to our channel sales engineer, etc. So we've broken up North America into 3 different categories here. So we have the West Coast, Central, and East. So West Coast is handled by Andy, Central is handled by Jacob, and then David handles the East Coast and Canada. So we break up our products into a couple different categories that we're going to focus on today. So security appliances, wireless solutions, switches, access solutions. This is mostly our consumer type stuff, and we're not going to talk about the consumer products today. And then network management. So we're actually going to start talking about network management with Zyxel Nebula. So Nebula is something that basically works with all of our product lines. So it works with our switches, our access points, and our security gateways. So this is sort of the glue that ties all of the products together. So it is a cloud-based network management platform. So if you're familiar with Cisco's Meraki, it's a very similar solution, although our solution has been aimed more at the SMB space and the smaller MSPs. We launched this all the way back in 2016 and have been improving it ever since. So Nebula unlocks a bunch of features for you. So one of the things it's designed to do is to make it easier for you to deploy your customers' networks, both when it comes to hardware installation, the amount of stuff you need to buy, as well as a number of optimizations, wizards, things like that to make it easier to get your network up and running. With Nebula, you can start configuring your customer site before you've even finalized which hardware you're going to buy for them. At any point, you can log into nebula.zyxel.com and start setting up your customers and their networks. Not all settings, but many settings will be available for you even before you've assigned any hardware to that customer. So you can start making your wireless configurations and stuff like that while you're still debating which models you need to purchase or waiting for those to come in. Once the hardware does come in, you simply scan a QR code on the outside of the box. And assign that device to a customer. Then you just ship it off to the customer's location. Once it gets plugged in, as soon as it has power and an internet connection, it'll reach out to the cloud. It'll download the configuration that it needs for that customer's site. It'll update any firmware and things like that. So this easy way of doing things is done on our wireless products and most of our switches. Security products, there's a couple extra steps involved simply because these are sort of like the gateway to your network. So it's a little bit more difficult to get that up and running just to make sure somebody doesn't do it, take over something, take over one of your gateways when they shouldn't. And then also on our 1350 series switches, those you have to enable Nebula mode in the GUI with the current firmware that's shipping with them. So in order to use Nebula, you don't need anything other than, Zyxel networking equipment. There's no software that needs to be installed. There's no virtual machines. There's no cloud keys, wireless LAN controllers, CNA devices. The Nebula agent is built into the networking hardware itself, and everything is self-contained in the hardware. So there's nothing extra you need to buy or configure or set up. And basically anywhere you've got access to an internet connection, you have access to your customers' networks. There's no need to worry about setting up, port forwards or VPN connections to be able to access your customer's location. All of your customers are viewable and accessible through the Nebula interface. All configuration changes, including firmware updates, are done through the cloud, so there's no need to go on site to update things. And Nebula was designed from the ground up, the idea that you're going to have multiple customers, and those customers may have multiple sites. So we've optimized the interface to make it easy for you to quickly find your customers and see what's going on. So I've got an example here of the dashboard. This is what you see when you go into a customer site. It's customizable which widgets you see there, but you can see things at a quick glance, like how many users are on the wireless network, how much of your PoE budget is currently being utilized, are any of your devices offline. If you're using our Nebula Managed security gateways, you can see application level information, so which applications are using the most bandwidth, as well as which users, security hits, things like that. Joe is asking here, can you power cycle with Nebula if the device cannot be reached? So I'll go ahead and answer that. So if the device itself is a Nebula device, it does need to be functioning to do it. But if a connected device is not working, if you're using one of our PoE switches to power that device, you can then reboot the device by power cycling the PoE on that port. In the case of our 1350 series switches, we have a feature on those where they can automatically pull a connected device using ping or LLDP. And you can specify if it fails so many ping checks, power cycle the device to reboot it. And we also give you a setting in there. So you can say, how much time do you need to wait for that device to power up before you resume checking it again? So those would be the 1350 series switches with the Nebula Pro Pack. Those can automatically power cycle devices that stop responding. We'll go on here, continuing. So Nebula itself is free. So there used to be a lot of free cloud services. Most of those are converted over to either paid mode or are severely restricted. In the case of Nebula, the core functionality is there for you. There are no limits to the number of devices you can manage with the free version of Nebula, no limitation to the number of customers you can manage with the free version of Nebula. We do offer some upgrade licenses which unlock additional features, mostly aimed at sort of MSP type features, advanced diagnostic type stuff, more logs stored in the cloud, things like that. So when you're looking at our products, you will see the term Nebula Flex. So when we first launched Nebula, we copied what Meraki was doing, right? With Cisco, if you want cloud management, you buy Meraki. If you don't want cloud management, you buy Cisco. And we had originally done the same sort of thing. But one of the things that we found out was, that people didn't like that. They didn't like the idea that, for one customer who's you're doing cloud management, you buy one set of hardware. For another customer who's maybe hesitant to use clouds, you had to buy a different set of hardware. So what we did is we created Nebula Flex. And so Nebula Flex products have replaced our dedicated Nebula products. So when you're looking at our spec sheet or you're looking at the price list, you will see Nebula Flex. So what Nebula Flex means is this device can be managed the traditional way, directly logging into the device using the GUI or using a command line or SNMP, or you can manage it with the free Nebula Cloud. So dual mode functionality. Now, one thing to keep in mind is configurations are different between standalone and cloud. So if you do switch modes, you basically have to start over the configuration process again. In the case of Nebula, if you're converting to Nebula, that configuration is already in the cloud, but when you switch it back to standalone, you'll have to reconfigure it. But you can endlessly switch back and forth between the two, keeping that in mind. Products that are labeled Nebula Flex Pro, basically what that's telling you is just like before, you can use that product as standalone or cloud managed, but we have bundled with it a 1 year of our Pro Pack license. So again, the Pro Pack license unlocks some additional features. We have a dedicated Nebula presentation we do just about every month. So you can join that if you want to learn more about Nebula. We've also got those recorded, so you can go to our YouTube page, Zyxel America channel, and find the last time we did one of those. But Pro unlocks like automatic reports, the ability to brand those reports with your name, years worth of logs stored in the cloud, an unlimited user and MAC address database, things like that. So nothing that you necessarily need, but some nice features to have if you want it. When it comes to our access points that are Nebula Flex Pro also is going to denote that these can be managed with a local controller. So if you aren't looking for cloud management, you still want to go with the traditional local controller, Nebula Flex Pro access points are what you're looking for. So Nebula Flex Pro is dual mode for all products, except for those access points, which are then tri-mode for management. So that's it for Nebula. We'll move on to security products now. So our security products have been certified by ICSA for over 20 years in a row now. So ICSA is an independent lab that does testing of firewall and VPN products. So this is something where we've been using them for all these years. They continue to certify our product. So it's something to give to your customers, when you say, hey, I want to upgrade your old Sonic wall to this new Zyxel, and they go, well, who the heck is Zyxel? This is something you can point to and say, they've been making these security products or network products for over 30 years. Their security products have been certified for over 20 years by this independent lab. Another thing that we do a little bit differently, which might help you sell the product, is that we don't do our own signatures. So when you're selling UTM appliances, those are your security firewalls that have antivirus or content filtering or whatever built in. Most vendors on the market create those signatures themselves. So not only do they have to be making a secure firewall product, but they have to be a content filtering company, an antivirus company, et cetera, et cetera. So rather than do that in-house, what we've done instead is decided to partner with other companies who are well-known in those spaces. So we work with McAfee, Trend Micro, Lastline, et cetera, to provide those signatures that our products use rather than trying to do it in-house. So that way we're focused on the hardware, we're focused on the firewall aspects, and we're letting the security experts focus on the security side of things. So as we go through our products here, we'll go through some of the general features you'll find on the security products. Some of this may not be available in some of the lower end models, but most of these features are available across the board. So link aggregation groups, being able to be able to group ports together, give priority, increase your capacity, et cetera. High availability, so if one device fails, a second device can automatically take over. SSL packet inspection, being able to basically enforce those UTM rules and your firewall gateway rules, even if the traffic is SSL encrypted. The ability to integrate with Radius and Active Directory for being able to do user-based implementation of rules and access controls. On the VPN side of things, we offer VPN high availability, WAN load balancing, multiple WANs. We do not, despite what that slide says, we do not offer native support for mobile broadband, but of course you can always buy a standalone mobile device and plug that into one of the WAN ports for failover or for out-of-band management. We offer on the VPN side of things, we offer a lightweight SSL VPN tool that you can use. We support L2TP over IPsec for mobile devices. And then our UTM products offer antivirus, content filtering, Layer 7 application intelligence. So basically, we have the ability to recognize not only this traffic is, but what application is generating that traffic, and allow you to create rules based on the individual application. So instead of going through and needing to know destination addresses and traffic type, you can simply go in and pull down from a list of applications that you want to apply, say, blocking rules to or traffic shaping rules to. And in many cases, we can go in there and set different rules for different types of traffic. For instance, we can allow, text messages, but block video chats or file transfers. On our ATP appliances, we have sandboxing and machine learning, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, intrusion prevention, reputation filters, etc. So most of our security products, in addition to being a firewall and VPN appliance and offering security services, also have the ability to act as a wireless LAN controller. So again, if you or your customer don't like the cloud, you can always use your existing single box gateway there to also act as a AP controller to manage those access points. And we also have the ability to unlock hotspot functionality, so you can provide guest access. Then on top of that, we do have here the certifications and work with both AWS and Microsoft for cloud hosted applications. Basically, this allows us to create a certified VPN tunnel to the cloud where your applications are hosted, so that way local users on the network can access these resources as if they were locally hosted tools instead of cloud-based solutions. So when it comes to the hardware, we've got three basic lines. So we've grouped them under simplicity for our VPN series, flexibility for the USG Flex series, and ultimate for the ATP series. For the most part, when you're looking at our security appliances, the feature set is the same across the models in the same family. The main difference is going to be the horsepower, what sort of throughput you can get through that firewall appliance, and the port configuration. But as far as the features go, it's all largely the same between the different models. So you don't have to go, well, this model has this model has that. It's the same. It's just how much horsepower do I need? What sort of port configuration do I need? So sort of split these things up here for you. The VPN series is just like it sounds. It's a firewall appliance that is tuned and focused on providing VPN services. So if you've got a location, you need a lot of VPN tunnels, or you don't need a lot of VPN tunnels, you just don't need UTM type security services. The VPN series models is what you are looking at. If you want those UTM type features, then you want to go up to the USG Flex series. The USG Flex models are sold two ways. One with those UTM services bundled with it. So you normally get a year's worth of those UTM services out of the box. And then we also sell a cheaper version, which doesn't come with any of those UTM services. If you decide to enable them later, you will need to buy and apply licenses. So the USG Flex versus the VPN series here, this is going to be your main difference. They're all doing proper firewall appliance. They're all doing proper VPN functionality, but the USG Flex here unlocks some additional features for you. Geo Enforcer, that application security, malware blocker, intrusion detection and prevention, anti-spam functionality, and this deep scan mode for scanning stuff that's coming through. And then on top of that is our Ultimate series, which is the ATP series. So these come bundled out of the box with 1 year of our UTM type services. And this unlocks for you sandboxing and IP reputation filter. And again, I'll talk a little bit about sandboxing here in another slide coming up. So one other tool we have here is SD-WAN. So I'll talk about this briefly. Basically, the VPN series, you buy a VPN series, you can buy an SD-WAN license, and it will convert your VPN firewall appliance to an SD-WAN appliance. So we'll briefly talk about that for those of you not familiar with SD-WAN. So the SD stands for software-defined networking. Basically, what we're doing in a nutshell is taking advantage of the fact that when you're trying to connect two or more locations together, that you own and control the hardware that's on that WAN connection. And so because you control it on both ends of the connection, there's some tricks and some things you can do which don't necessarily follow the standards method of implementing IP addressing and things like that, that allow us to basically speed up and outperform a traditional VPN type appliance. This functionality has been mostly aimed at multi-site locations, so a company that's got multiple sites. And historically, what they would do to link those sites together is they would use what's called MPLS, which is a really expensive dedicated connection between these different locations. They generally didn't have that much bandwidth, but what they did have is they were private, so you weren't competing with public internet traffic and things like that. The challenge with these is they're kind of slow, and that they are expensive. So the idea here was, well, let's offer that class of service, but let's do it over the public internet so you don't have to pay for anything extra to your ISP to be able to use it. A really common application of this is voice over IP. So you've got a central office, you've got multiple remote offices, and you want to put your VoIP server at the main central location and have all of the remote locations connect back to that as the primary, voice gateway. So again, traditionally that was done using MPLS or dedicated other types of dedicated connections from the ISP. SD-WAN is designed to be able to handle that. So this is just showing here, a situation here where you've got 3 different locations here. You've got a UK office. Whose flag is that? I don't know. And then you've got us here in Italy. So going between these 3 different locations here, because you control the WAN interface at each of these 3 locations, you're able to optimize TCP acceleration. You're able to make optimizations that help mitigate latency issues. And there's things you can do to help prevent packet loss. To optimize the connection. So here's a real world example. So this is comparing our German office with our Taiwan office. And this is just showing here the connection type right here. So you've got a 290 millisecond round trip, 0.3% packet loss, 3 millisecond jitter, which is really good over such a long connection. So with a traditional VPN connection between these two and trying to transfer a large Linux distribution file, a 1.9 gig file, it took nearly 3 hours to send that data because of the way TCP IP works and FTP works, is it never was able to maximize the performance and the speed. So by switching, to SD-WAN, we were able to reduce that time from nearly 3 hours down to just 10 minutes to transfer that same file. And you would also see big benefits here when it comes to latency and things like that. So it makes a big difference. So that's it for SD-WAN. I probably did a horrible job explaining that, but hopefully it gives you some idea of what it does. So now we'll talk a little bit about the ATP series. So the ATP, the A stands for advanced. This is our advanced threat protection. And this is what you might call a next generation UTM firewall appliance. So again, the USG Flex is our standard UTM firewall appliance. The ATP is our next generation or our advanced threat protection. So the main thing here is difference is how it handles threats. So traditionally, the way a UTM appliance works is you periodically download signatures from the cloud, which identify different types of threats. And then you compare traffic to those threats. The problem you run into is when there's a new type of attack or a new type of exploit out there on the internet, is it takes time for that new type of traffic to be noticed, and then for security researchers to isolate it, to create those signatures, and then there's a delay between when those signatures are ready and when they're actually published and download onto your appliances. So it leaves you a chunk of traffic out there that you don't know if it's good or bad because it doesn't match any of the signatures that currently exist. So the ATP is designed to solve that using what's called sandboxing and using machine learning or artificial intelligence. So basically what happens is when your ATP appliance sees some traffic, it tries to classify the traffic. And if it doesn't know what that traffic is, it then can sandbox it, temporarily block it, and basically upload that information to a cloud server that we have. That cloud server then has the ability to basically run thousands and thousands of different simulations to try to figure out what this new type of traffic does, and then identify, is it something that's bad or something that's good, and then let your device know whether it should allow that traffic through or it should block it as being malicious. So part of the big way this works is every one of our ATP appliances is connected to the cloud. So I'm sure you've seen this in the past when there's new threats, new types of exploits, is they generally start in one geographic location and then migrate across the world. So with ATP, since you're connected in the cloud and all of our ATPs are connected to that cloud, as soon as that new type of traffic reaches one of our ATP customers, it'll get sent up to our cloud. It'll automatically get analyzed using machine learning. And as soon as we've identified what it is, we can push out that new signature basically instantaneously to all the other connected devices. So by the time the new threat or new exploit migrates to where you happen to be, you've already got a signature that tells you, hey, I need to block this traffic. This is malicious. So now this is not something we do in-house. Again, like I said, when it comes to these advanced security services, we partner with other companies. So in this case, we have partnered with LastLine. They are the one that is providing this cloud solution and the artificial intelligence that's being used to identify these new types of traffic. And then lastly, when talking about our security appliances, we have a tool known as SECU Reporter. So this is for monitoring and reporting security threats for you. I would say probably the main thing for this is when it comes to selling those UTM services to your customer. I'm sure we've all run into this. Their license is about to expire. You hit them up and say, hey, you know, these UTM services, they're about to expire. We need to buy a new license. And they go, well, why? What has it done for me? So this is a tool you can use that'll help you sell those services, is it basically tracks all of your customers in the cloud, connects to their security gateways, and is able to generate a large number of analysis and reports identifying what's been going on your customer's network. So you can show them, you know, this is what the antivirus that's built into your gateway, this is what it's protected you from, and what's going to go away if you don't buy the new services. Here's what the content filtering, these are the sites your customers or your employees have tried to go to on work that they shouldn't have, and here's what we've blocked for you. So you can show them that UTM functionality, those security services that are built into the gateway have been protecting them, because otherwise, right, they don't know what the gateway is dealing with, right? They're not logging in and checking the logs themselves. So this gives you the tools to be able to generate reports, which basically show exactly what's been going on, what threats have been blocked, who on your network was being targeted, when did this happen, where did the attack come from, etc. And this also has the ability to generate these ports and be able to identify and quickly show you which users on the network, right? Do you have a certain person that keeps going to sites they shouldn't have? Do you have a certain person that keeps trying to download, you know, pirated content? We'll be able to give you those reports and tell you who does it. And much like Nebula, this is a cloud-hosted solution. So you simply log into one place. All of your customers are there, so you've got access to everything there. You can customize the reports that get generated, and you can have them automatically sent out to your customers with your branding added into them. So you can give them weekly or monthly reports showing them, look at all this stuff that Zyxel gateway I've installed has been doing for you. And so you've got ammunition when it comes to renew those services to show them why it's beneficial for them to continue using those gateway-based security services. Now this piggybacks with Nebula. It doesn't replace it. This is just on the reporting side of things. It can be used with or without Nebula. So that's it for security. Now we'll move on to switches. So security is probably one of the most confusing when it comes to configuring and setting them up. Switches is probably where it's most confusing just because of how many different models we have for you to choose from. So we'll start by talking about the naming, because when you look at the naming, it helps you understand what that switch does. So once you learn our naming conventions, you can figure out quite a lot about the switch just by looking at that model number. So all of our switches start with a 2 or 3 letter prefix. So those that start with ES, that's telling you that's a 100 meg switch. We don't really sell those here in North America, but we still do make those for some other markets. If you see GS, that's telling you all of the ports on that switch are gigabit ports. That's probably the vast bulk of our switches that we have available. If you see XS, that tells you that this is a multi-gig switch where all of the ports are multi-gig. If you see XGS, that's telling you this is a gigabit switch, but it does have multi-gig uplink ports. And then there's an MGS switch. We don't sell those in North America, but if you stumble across them on our global website or while doing a Google search, MGS means Metro Switch. These are switches that are designed for like service providers. We just don't have much of a market for them in North America, so we don't offer them here. Now, when you're looking at that model number, you will also generally see some letters at the end. So if you see the letter P, that tells you it's a 802.3 AF PoE device, so 15.4 watts of power per port. Don't think we've got many of those left that we're selling here in North America. More commonly, you will see HP. So HP tells you high power. So that means it supports either 802.3 AT or 802.3 BT. So 802.3 AT is 30 watts per port. BT is 60 watts per port. We've just got a couple switches that support the 60 at the moment. And then if you see the letter F, that's telling you that this is a fiber switch. There are no copper ports on this switch. It is only used for fiber. Another thing we have, which may throw some people off, is we have what are called combo ports. And these are going to be on the uplink ports. And it can cause some confusion because people may see them and think that there's more ports than there actually are. So basically, if we have combo uplink ports, you've got a single port, but you've got two physical interfaces, copper and an SFP port. So you can use one or the other for that port, not both at the same time. So for instance, if you see something here like this switch here, this is a 1920.8 HP. So the GS tells you these are all gigabit ports, including the uplink ports. And then 8 HP is telling you there's 8 main ports here, and it supports 802.3 AT PoE. And then this switch also happens to have 2 uplink ports, but there are 4 physical interfaces here, right? So you've got 2 ports, so you've got 2 copper interfaces and 2 fiber interfaces to choose from. But at the end of the day, you can only use 2 of those at a time. So when it comes to SFP ports, those 1 gig switches, the switches that start with GS, those will use standard SFPs. If you see a XGS or XS switch and you see fiber ports on those are going to use SFP Plus, which support up to 10 gig fiber connections. We do sell our own SFP ports for you, and we also do work with third-party SFPs for the most part. So when it comes to stacking, most of our switches do not support physical stacking. Nebula does give you the ability to virtually stack, and many of our switches can also, if you're using them standalone, can virtually stack. But if you need physical stacking, we've just got a couple models that support that. And we sell a special, what's called a DAC cable, direct attached cable, for those higher end switches, which do support actual hardware stacking. And I already talked about here when it comes to PoE, there's the 3 different standards here, PoE, PoE plus, PoE plus plus. So most of our switches are going to be PoE plus these days. I don't think we've got anything that's actually standard, the old standard PoE, the old 15.4 watt. And then we've got a few switches that support the new PoE plus plus or 802.3 BT. And we'll be adding more of those as time goes on. So now comes the fun thing, trying to group our switches together. So one thing you will notice, I talked about the prefixes, the GS or XGS. I've talked about the suffix, an HP or an F. The next thing to be looking at when you're looking at the models is the numbers. So the numbers involved tell you a lot. So generally, you're going to look at the first 2 digits. So you can see here, we've sort of grouped these together here. The effortless series all start with 1 and then either a 0, 1, or a 3. The simplicity series, the 1, 2, or starts with 1, 9. Flexibility, 1, 3, 1, 9s, and then the ultimate series, which all start with 2, 3, or 4. And I know it's kind of confusing, and I'll try to explain what some of these different ones are for you. Now, when it comes to using Nebula, if you're looking for Nebula, you're going to want to be looking at the flexible or ultimate series. So let's go back here. Let's go back 1 slide. There we go. So the effortless series, these are going to be your unmanaged switches. So these have no web GUI, no VLANs. It's just a switch. So the difference is primarily going to be form factor. The 100 series, that'd be something like a GS108B V3. Those are going to be small consumer type desktop switches. When you jump up to 4-digit numbers, that's telling you these are more business oriented. So that gets you our 1000 and 1100 series. And then the 1300 series, we're no longer really offering those in North America. That was a series of unmanaged switches that was designed for IPTV. So going up from there is sort of a limited web GUI. So you have a web GUI for management, you have VLAN support, but you don't have the full feature set that you get on a true layer 2 or layer 2 plus switch. So the 1200 series is more of a consumer type product, a desktop based one. And then the 1900 is primarily rack mount type switches with a basic web GUI for interface. And then as we go up from there to the Nebula Managed products, you get more of a true full featured interface there on those. And then the Ultimate series is the true layer 2s that have, in addition to a web GUI, have command line interface for management. So we'll try to go through some of these models real quick. There's too many here for you to remember them all. So this is just showing here, if you're looking for like a sort of a prosumer desktop switch with some very basic VLAN functionality, the 1200 series is what you're looking at. As you can see, we've got gigabit models. We've got some models that support up to 10 gig uplink ports on them. And they all have just a basic interface for VLAN support. Jumping up to the 1900 series, now we've got a sort of more of a rack mount form factor. We've got heavier duty power supplies. And this is primarily probably going to be the lowest end that most of you out there are going to be looking at here as the 1900 series. So that'll give you some smart management. It gives you more features than the 1200 series did as far as the GUI goes in the settings. And then the next step up here is the 1920 and the 1930 series. So these are sort of more of your true full layer 2 type switches. These again can be Nebula managed. The 1930 series offers the 10 gig ports on them. And then from up there, oops, there's the 10. There we go. And then, going up to the 2200 series, this is our bread and butter switch. This is your standard, layer 2 switch with GUI, with command line interface, with Nebula management. So that'll be it. I mean, it's a quick overview. Like I said, as long as you know the model numbers, you can sort of get an idea of what you want to be looking at. There are, though, entirely too many different series. It is hard to keep track of at times. So when it comes to PoE, most of our switches, basically everything with 1900 series and up, offers intelligent PoE. So traditionally, the way PoE works, the way the industry standard is that devices identify themselves based on class, and then the switch reserves power based on that class. The challenge you run into, these classes go up really big. So you go from 15.4 watts for class 3 to 30 watts for class 4, right? You've doubled the power budget with only one class. The problem is there's a lot of products out there which need a little bit more than 15.4 watts of power, but don't need anywhere near 30, and you end up wasting a lot of space. So our 1900 series and higher switches have the ability to go into consumption mode or intelligent PoE mode, where they can monitor the connected device and free up the unused budget that would normally be reserved for them based on the industry standard way of doing things. So in this example here, we've got IP phones. These IP phones are a class 3 device, so they're reserving 15.4 watts of power each. However, realistically, they only need 9 watts of power. So with our intelligent mode here, we can free that up. So if we just went by class following the industry standard to power up 24 of these phones, would require 370 watt power budget. But by our consumption mode, you only actually need 216 watts of power. So you can use a smaller switch, or you can put on more devices onto one switch with the same PoE budget. Same thing here. This is an IP pan tilt zoom camera. By classification, it is a class 4 device, so it needs 30 watts of power, but it actually only really needs 16 watts. So again, if we tried to power up 20 of these, you would need a 600 watt power budget on your switches. Where using consumption mode, you only need 320 watts of budget to be able to power 20 of them. And then I want to talk here really briefly about the 1350 series. So the 1350 series is kind of an odd duck in our switch lineup. It is a series of switches that was designed specifically for the IPTV space. So it's got some interesting, unique features in there. And even if you're not doing, IP cameras, there may be some of these features that may be something interesting for you. So one of the things we can do is we can provide data and PoE power for up to 250 meters, where traditionally you've got a 100-meter limit. So if you've got to run extra long cable lengths, you don't have to add another switch or signal booster down the line. You can simply put this into extended range mode and provide PoE power and data up to 250 meters. It doesn't require anything special on the connected device. It should work with just about any PoE device. The only limitation is we do drop the data speed down to 10 megabits per second. So it's slow, but 10 megabits per second should be fast enough for all sorts of types of traffic, especially IP cameras. We have the ability to provide continuous PoE. So if for some reason the switch needs to reboot, the connected PoE devices will lose connectivity, but they won't lose power, so they won't reboot. So as soon as that switch comes back online, the connected devices are able to start working again. We have a mode where we're able to detect connected devices, show you the connected device's IP address, and make it really easy for you to power cycle those devices should you need to, or jump over to their interface. And then we have this automatic recovery mode that we talked about a little bit earlier. So basically you can use either ping or LLDP and basically tell it how often to pull the connected device and how many times that pull needs to fail before you determine the device is no longer functioning. And once it's determined the device is no longer functioning, it can reboot that connected device. And then you can also set in here how long before it starts resuming checking it again. Obviously, if you've got a camera that takes 2 minutes to boot up, you don't want to start checking again after 30 seconds because it still won't be responding until it's fully booted up. So it's a nice, fun feature to have. And they're built a little bit more heavy duty than some of our other switches. So on the accessory side of things for switches, we do offer SFP and SFP plus ports. We offer those direct attached cables. So those are all available through us. So that's it for switches. Now we're going to move on to wireless. So what models are surveillance ready? This is coming in from Wayne. So Wayne, surveillance models are going to be the 1350 series. So any of the 1350 series have all those features I was talking about. All of those features are available standalone. If you are using it with Nebula, you do need the Pro Pack to unlock some of those features. So something to keep in mind. So now onwards to wireless. Wireless is a lot easier than switches, or at least it used to be. So when it comes to wireless, we've really got three sort of categories. We've got sort of a prosumer play that we use to compete with like lower end Ubiquiti and Netgear and TP-Link. So I'm not talking about those guys today. I'm talking about our business class stuff here just to keep this simple. So all of these access points I am talking about today come with a lifetime warranty. And the reason we can do that is how we construct our access points. So if you've been to some of our older trade shows and met us there, we may have had on display some of our access points and had some of our competitors' access points from Ubiquiti up to Ruckus, and encouraged you to pick them up. And one thing you would notice is ours weigh a lot more. And some of those trade shows, we would have ones that we could open up. So you could look inside both ours and our competitors and see the differences in construction. So these are solid state devices. So what causes a solid state device to fail? The two major causes of failure are going to be capacitor failures and heat fatigue. So heat buildup can cause solder joints to fail. It can cause the little micro switches inside your ICs to fail. So to combat that, we've done two things here. The first one is we've got this large metal plate that goes behind our PCBA, which is designed to draw heat off the board and off of those components and then vent it out the vent holes on our access point. If you look at some of our lower end competitors, they don't even have access holes for the heat to go out, let alone this. So this is one of the reasons why even on our cheaper access points, such as our NWA 1123 ACV3, which sells for $99, even though it's a $99 access point, it still uses this design philosophy. And that's why we can still offer a 1-year warranty, or excuse me, a lifetime warranty, where most of our competition is offering 1 or 2 years warranty in that space. So by getting that heat off the board, it helps extend the life of those components. And then we only use solid state capacitors in our designs. There are no electrolytic capacitors on our access points because those are a point of failure. They can dry up, they can leak, they can swell. So we've gotten rid of all of those. The next thing you will notice on our access points is we've got a lot more shielding on the PCBA than you find with most of our competitors. And that's because generally the shielding is there to prevent EMI from other board components from interfering with each other. But we've added additional shielding to help deal with 4G and 5G cellular signals. So a lot of those signals can border the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum that Wi-Fi uses and can bleed over. This is especially true in larger office buildings, conference centers, expo centers, things like that, where you have got extenders bringing that 4G and 5G signal from outside into the building and distributing them indoors. So we've got extra shielding to help make sure that doesn't interfere with your the quality of your signal. And then the next thing you will see is our antennas are not mounted directly onto the PCBA. They are on their own separate board, and there is a reflector or a shielding bar here that goes between the main PCBA and the antennas. So even if you look at something like a $1,200 or $1,300 Ruckus and you open them up, you will find their antennas are mounted directly onto the PCBA. By moving them to their own board and putting a shield between them and the main PCBA, it helps reduce EMI. Doesn't make a lot of difference for those good, strong signals, you know, when you're close to the AP, but can make a huge difference on those edge cases, those users who are right on the edge of Wi-Fi connectivity, and can make a huge difference in the reliability of that connection on those margins. Another technology we've got here that I think only we have is something called dual optimized antennas. Most access points, including those really expensive Cisco ones, basically have one antenna configuration in them. They're designed to be mounted on a ceiling, and they have what's roughly a circular umbrella-shaped antenna pattern that goes out. Unfortunately, you don't always get to mount your access points on the ceiling. Sometimes you got to mount them on the walls. And when you do that, you get, you know, a less than ideal coverage, because the antenna pattern is designed for being above your users, not being to the side of your users. So our way of dealing with this is this technology we call dual optimized antenna. So for those access points which have dual optimized antennas, we've got two sets of antennas for each radio. One that's optimized for your traditional ceiling mount and one that's optimized for being mounted on the wall. And you can switch between them. So those APs that get mounted on a wall, you can switch them to wall mode. Those APs that get mounted on the ceiling, you can switch them to ceiling mode. So that gives you much better coverage. The other technology we have is smart antenna. So smart antenna is something that's primarily just us and Ruckus that offers this. Ruckus calls theirs Beam Flex Plus. So that's what we offer. Now you will see a lot of 11AC, Wave 2 and stuff products offer something called beamforming. Beamforming is not smart antenna. It's a completely different unrelated technology, but people sometimes get those confused. So smart antenna technology is basically about maximizing the quality of experience. In particular, ours is implemented designed to deal with interference, right? You've got the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum, and it's all being shared by every type of wireless device out there. And there's not a lot of it, especially if you're trying to use the faster speeds on your 11AC or Wi-Fi 6 products. So smart antenna has been designed to solve that. So again, your traditional access point is designed with a fixed antenna pattern that's roughly a circle. So here's your sort of a traditional situation here. You've got your AP mounted above the area that's being covered. And then over here, you've got a source of RF interference. In this case, it's a microwave. It can be another access point. It can be some other piece of wireless equipment that also uses 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. It can be a piece of industrial equipment, whatever it is. So it starts putting out interference and it causes problems to connected devices. So smart antenna solves that by, instead of having one antenna pattern, or like our dual optimized antenna having two antenna patterns, we have hundreds of antenna patterns. And the access point is able to go through those and choose the best one for each client device. So it can optimize and choose an antenna pattern not only that focuses the signal towards where the client it's talking to is, but it can also optimize that signal so it doesn't listen in the direction of RF interference. other sources of noise. So it's really handy for dealing with that. So it's really nice in areas where you've got other sources of RF interference. So great in places like apartments and condos, where you've got thin walls and you've got a lot of other access points that you can't manage. It's good in office buildings, again, where you've got multiple floors and multiple offices and your customers, only in one of those. So you can't control what the neighbors are doing. It's really good in situations like expo centers and conference rooms where you've got a lot of users in the same space. So here's an example here. We took our WAC 650S, which is a 4x4 Wi-Fi 6 AP, and compared it to the Aruba AP515, which is also a 4x4 Wi-Fi 6 access point. Our performance is in green, the Aruba is in blue, and as you can see, there's a big difference in performance here between the two because of the smart antenna. A number of years back here, a group at the University of Brescia in Italy, their networking group saw claims made by us and Ruckus about smart antenna. So they decided to test it. So they went out, they bought Ruckus, they bought us, they bought Cisco, they bought HP, and put them through a number of tests. There's a link down there where you can find the white paper, which goes through everything they did, their full testing. But a quick summary here for you is that smart antenna made a huge difference in co-channel interference environments, which is basically everywhere in the real world that's not a testing lab, and found that even our smart antenna outperformed Ruckus's smart antenna, particularly when dealing with interference. So moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about Wi-Fi 6, because this is still kind of a new technology. So Wi-Fi 6 replaced Wi-Fi 5, which most of you know is 802.11 AC or 802.11 AC Wave 2. The main thing here is it's made a significant number of changes to how Wi-Fi works that are specifically aimed at solving some of the issues that have plagued Wi-Fi since its invention. Particularly the fact that Wi-Fi just doesn't handle user-dense environments or AP-dense environments very well. You get really poor airtime utilization, there's interference issues, things like that. So Wi-Fi 6 has been designed to change a lot of that. So it's faster. In theory, you can make models up to almost 10 gigs wireless transmission. But just like other Wi-Fi, a good chunk of that is your overhead protocols that make Wi-Fi possible. So if you do a speed test, an FTP test or something, you're probably looking at 50 to 60% of those speeds. It's designed to boost the number of users and the number of APs that can be operated within each other without causing interference. And most importantly, Wi-Fi 6 works on both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band. 11AC was only on the 5 gigahertz band. So if you're dealing with an 11AC product, that 2.4 radio is still essentially an 11N radio. So some of the things, the new technologies that we've got here is you've got MU-MIMO in both directions, both upstream and downstream. Before with 11AC, it was only possible from the AP to the users. Now you can have multiple users transmitting back to the AP at the same time. We've added OFDMA. Before it was just OFDM. So, and this works in both directions and allows you to much more granular control over how the channels are allocated and how they're divided up into chunks. We've got some scheduling things here to make it easier to determine when packets should be sent, so you're not stepping on each other's toes. BSS coloring, so packets include identifiers as to who they're going to, so devices can ignore packets that aren't intended for them. And then for battery operated devices, low power devices, schedule based of when those devices wake up to transmit. So it's really cool technology. Some things here to keep in mind. Not all Wi-Fi 6 products are built the same. There are many Wi-Fi 6 products out there that are missing some of these features. They're based on either older silicon or they're just made to be less expensive. So you will see this on a lot of the cheaper access points that are out there, including ours, our prosumer APs are missing some of those features. And then some vendors, for instance, Ubiquiti, a number of their Wi-Fi 6 products, they've only put Wi-Fi 6 on the 5 gigahertz radio. The 2.4 radio is still shipping with Wi-Fi 4 11N technology. So when it comes to our business class APs, basically everything 1000 and higher, those are all full featured Wi-Fi 6. across both radios. So don't have to worry about any of those issues with our, basically anything from the NWA 110AX and higher, full Wi-Fi 6 feature set, Wi-Fi 6 on both radios. But it is something to keep in mind. And when you're looking at comparison products, it's not always easy to tell which products have the full Wi-Fi 6 feature set, which don't, because obviously they're not calling out the features they're missing. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about the controller. For those of you that don't want to use Nebula Management, like I said before, we do have the ability to locally manage our APs, and the feature set is largely the same between the cloud and local area controller. Both offer some version of mesh. Both offer our zero AP deployment. So basically our access points, if you're using Nebula, you simply add them to Nebula, they'll reach out to the cloud and see that they've been assigned to a site in the cloud and automatically switch to Nebula mode. Same thing goes true here when it comes to our controller. They will detect that you have an active controller on the local network and automatically connect to it. So either case, there's no need to configure the individual APs to get them to talk to your controller. The one main area where local controller differs from the cloud controller is rogue AP detection. At the moment, Nebula does not support rogue AP detection. So if rogue AP detection is something you do need to use a local area controller for your management. And this is just showing you here the breakdown of the different VPN, USG Flex, and ATP models. All of these ones have built-in wireless LAN controller. So this column here is how many APs can be managed directly out of the box. And then this column here is showing you how many devices can be managed with an optional unlock license. So you can see here the VPN 1000 out of the box, it'll support 8 access points, but you can upgrade it to support or to manage up to 1,000 access points. And with that, guys, it's over. It's been a long time. Thank you for sticking through this with me. I know it's not the most exciting material, but hopefully it's given you a little bit better idea of our product lines and maybe some of the stuff you want to do more of a deep dive into in the future. All of our webinars or most of our webinars are recorded and posted to our YouTube. There are lots of different YouTube channels for Zyxel out there. So the one for North America is Zyxel America channel. That's where you want to go. So if you've missed one of our presentations or there's a new presentation coming out, but you don't have time to get to it, this is where you can find a recording of it. And with that, any other questions, feel free to send them in using that question and answer interface. And while I wait for those to come in, just draw your attention. We do have user forums, forum.zyxel.com. I highly recommend you check it out. Not only is it a place for you to talk to other Zyxel users and installers, it is monitored by our product management and support teams. So you will occasionally see them answering questions that you may have. Even if they don't respond, just be aware that they are seeing some of the feedback you're providing there. It's also the first place where firmware release notes and security advisories get posted. So it's a good one-stop shop for information about changes and things that are going on for Zyxel. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate that comment. So Brent is asking controllers or switches. So no, the controllers are our security gateway. So if you're looking for a local wireless LAN controller, we do have a NXC. It's a dedicated device for providing wireless LAN management. They are being phased out. And going forward, it's just part of our security lineup. So any of the VPN series, USG Flex series, or ATP series security gateways have that wireless LAN controller functionality built into them. So basically it's a one-stop box, right? Your one box can be your firewall appliance, your VPN appliance, your security appliance, your wireless LAN controller, and your hotspot gateway. So that's kind of the idea behind that. But yeah, if you want to do that, you do want to buy one of our security appliances. Now, if you don't want to use them, you've already got a security appliance, that's fine. You can put those in bridge mode where they basically are only acting as a wireless LAN controller. You don't have to use the firewall features if you don't want to. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. If you do have something, reach out to your salesperson, or you can email me. My email is Sean R. Sean is spelled S-H-A-W-N. and then r@zyxel.com, or just reach out to your salesperson, Jacob, Andy, whoever. They can always forward questions to me. But thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys turning out. And we do have more webinars coming up this month. Hopefully I see you at a few of those. Thanks, guys.